Good morning, students. Today let us see the introduction to English poetry. So first thing is, we need to define poetry. What poetry is. Wordsworth defines poetry as the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. So the definition is poetry as a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Here what is very important is it should be very spontaneous, as well as it is the overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. A poet is actually, who is a poet, is a person who has got a higher level of imagination and who's got a very comprehensive soul. He is a man speaking to men. He is communicating the hidden truths which are around us, and he reveals those truths in a very beautiful way with the use of perfect language. So now we'll see how to appreciate poetry. So poetry, first thing we have to see the different forms of poetry. Poetry is actually in each age a particular form developed. Like if you take epic, ode, lyric, like ballad, narrative poetry, dramatic monologue. So these are the different forms of poetry. So the recent one is free verse. So like that there are different forms of poetry. And the second thing is we have to see what is the theme of the poetry. What is the poet trying to communicate to us? What is the title of it? What is the theme of it? So while understanding a poetry or appreciating a poetry, we ought to see what is the theme of it, what is the message he is trying to give. That is the theme of the poetry. So the third thing is, who are the characters involved in the poetry? What is the tone of the poet? So in what mood he writes the poem? So that is the tone of the poet, and what is the mood effect he is trying to create, whether it is a sad poem or whether it is a happy poem, all that is important. So for the thing is, there is a thing between the tone of the writer as well as the mood of the writer, or the mood of the poet, what effect it wants to create, whether he wants to create a happy mood or a sad mood. Accordingly we have to understand the poem. These are things we have to see while understanding, appreciating a poem. And then we have to see the rhythm or the music or the meter which makes it a poem. That is the difference between prose and poetry. What makes the difference is the meter. Okay, meter, rhythm, or the sound effect in a poem. That is, certain things can be sung. So that is the speciality of poetry. And the style is the techniques which are used by the poet while writing a poem. So the poet might use a simile. What is a simile? Simile is actually a comparison, like using ants and like. The baby is like a rose. Our face is like a moon. So this is a simile. The metaphor is also a comparison, but it is a direct comparison. So here the poet may use repetition, alliteration, so far-fetched conceits. So these are the things will make the poem more effective. So that is the choice of words, language, images. So these makes the poem more unique and more beautiful. This adds beauty to the poem. So but the thing is, while understanding a poem or appreciating a poem, we ought to see the theme of it, the message, main message, central idea of the poem, or the style of the poem, like a mood of the poem, the characters involved. So these are things we need to know and we need to read understand in a poem. The next thing is we have to see how poetry, British poetry, earlier it was only British poetry originated and developed. We will see the origin and development of British poetry. So British poem, it started with like Anglo-Saxon, Anglo-Norman period. So there we see the epic form. It is about a great hero who's struggling against a monster or something like that. There we can find the supernatural element, and the hero is trying to manage a situation which is very, very uncontrollable thing. And he is of a higher stature, who is very strong, who can even challenge a demon or a monster or something like that. So the main important points of this period, Anglo-Saxon period, is a seafarer and Beowulf. And there we find that it is in the form of an epic which talks about a person who is of a higher stature and who is very powerful, and there are lots, and it is in the narrative form, and they use it in the grand scale, this epic form. And second period we find that from the Anglo-Saxon, so for a long time poetry was, we come to know that people love to listen to stories. I mean, those stories were written in poetry form, and most of it were narrated in a oral form in the beginning. The second thing, we come to the Middle English period or the medieval period, which is called, in this period, we find Chaucer is one of the most important poets during this period. So his masterpiece is Canterbury Tales. So in this Canterbury Tales, it is actually a pilgrimage. The people are gathered there in a point, in a inn, to go to Sir Thomas Becket's sacred place. So it is a holy place, and they have to take a pilgrimage. On the way, they keep narrating a story in a very poetic language. We find Chaucer use language is so fluid. So one writer comments him as, here you can see God's plenty. The characterization, this variety of characterization from different classes of the society, and we can find each one narrates a story in order to forget the pain of traveling and things like that. And the best story will be awarded with a free lunch or something like that. So here the story is in a very narrative form, and we find he is known for his characterization. Each character is unique. And another thing is, at times we find that he lacks the seriousness. His lines were sometimes licentious. So that is the theme of the Chaucerian poetry. And we find the next comes the Renaissance poetry. So there we find Renaissance is a period where poetry flourished. The important writer there is Spenser. His Faerie Queene is mainly in the form of an allegory. So here it is referring to the Faerie Queene is actually the queen, and each character, for example, kindness will take the form of a character. That is an allegory. So the abstract things are personified. So that kind of an allegory is used there in Spenser's Faerie Queene, and we find that another kind of a poetry flourished during this period is the pastoral poetry. Odyssey and things like that. The pastoral element, we find that how man is very happy amidst nature and things like that. Another kind of, they have experienced the purest form of nature, and man is in harmony with nature. That is the kind of poetry we see in other poems of Spenser. Then coming to the next thing is the metaphysical poets. So metaphysical poets are a group of poets, and we can call John Donne as the father of metaphysical poetry. And here we find these writers are known for using a lot of far-fetched comparisons. They use a lot of conceits, metaphors and similes, and mainly they raise a lot of questions in religion and love were the central themes of these writers. And we find that, like for example, they use curt, abrupt sentences, shocking openings, and that has become a trait of this metaphysical poetry. The thing is, far-fetched comparison is the main important element of this metaphysical poetry. And John Donne's valediction forbidding mourning is a very important point. And we can find in Andrew Marvell to his choir misters. For example, the Lady Love, actually the essence of this poem is, the theme of the poem is, the lover is calling the Lady Love, come let us enjoy life. And he's saying life is very short. And he will say that I can hear the time's winged chariot chasing us. So let us enjoy. If at all I had that time I would have taken 100 years to describe your face, 100 years to describe your eyes, like that he goes. So these are the far-fetched images and comparisons, like imagining that 100 years a person can take to describe a person's face. And another thing we see is time is personified as that of coming back in a winged chariot chasing the lovers. So he says, before the worm eats your body, let us enjoy life. That's what is the message in this poem. So these are the well-known writers, like we see Donne. Herbert is more of religious thing, and he was also a person who from a religious line. He was a priest, and he expresses his struggle in the form of poetry. And these are the important things we see in the metaphysical poetry. And next period we find that the new classical age, we find that it is the age of prose and reason. There we find that a particular kind of poetry emerged. There is satire. Satire is a literary poetic technique which is used to criticize the negative things for the sake of correction. It is a kind of a negative thing used for correction. So if you tell it, satire can be used for positive as well as negative. So if at all some person is is not satisfied with the present political setup or government or something like that, or king or queens, they can write in the form of a satire in order to point out the mistakes of the people who are in power or something like that. So among these poets we find the real poet of this voyage is Thomas Gray. His poem of an elegy written in a country churchyard he doesn't talk about satire. We find that a kind of a pastoral setup where this an elegy is about talking in praise of a dead person. The story setting is a country churchyard, and he's talking about how when you die, both the great king as well as an ordinary man will be equals, are placed in the same graveyard. So that is the main thing we see here. So here in Gray we find the pastoral setting is there, and he uses the form of elegy. Elegy is usually used to praise a dead person. Okay, so we find that in this age we find that here Gray is supposed to be the classic of this age, classic for poetry. So whereas Dryden and Pope were classics of prose. And next period is the most important period where poetry flourished. So that is the Romantic period. And here we find William Wordsworth, Coleridge, Blake Keats, Shelley. These are the important Romantic poets. Okay, so their focus is these writers. Among these writers, Wordsworth is called as the father of Romantic poetry. So if you see in their poems that they didn't conform to any kind of classical groups. They were very, very imaginative, highly imaginative. Their themes are mainly nature. They wanted to describe nature and man and in harmony with nature. And they also pointed out the errors of human beings when they due to industrial revolution and other things like that, when they have disregard for, when they pollute nature. So they express their concerns for the ecology. So here we find an important point there is Wordsworth, and we find each one take a different aspect of, talks about a different aspect of nature. So if you take Keats describes all the beautiful seasons and autumn. He talks about the birds, about the nightingale. So beautiful ode on a Grecian urn. He talks about the urn. He captures a moment in the thing, and the urn. He takes the urn and it reminds him of all the pastoral and beautiful sights and scenes. He is called as a sensuous poet. Whereas we find Shelley as a revolutionary poet. In his ode to Brisbane, he talks about how he wanted to bring about changes in the society. This revolutionary ideas, he wants all the dead ideas to go away, and he was wanted to create a revolution among people. So each writer, we find that they make a request to different aspects of nature. And we find in Coleridge, we find he talks about the supernatural elements. And we find an ancient mariner or in Christabel, we find that he talks about, he makes the supernatural look very natural. And whereas Wordsworth makes a natural look, gives us a supernatural. That's the difference between Wordsworth and Coleridge. So here they combine to write the lyrical ballads. So this period is a very, very important period for poetry, and it is an age of poetry, and each poetry is unique in its own way, because they focus mainly on imagination, nature, and we find Wordsworth talks about the common man. So far, poetry always talked about in an epic or things like that. We talks about a person from a high stature, either it should be a king or a person, a ruler, or a person, a god or goddesses. So here in this kind of a poetry, we find that the common man, the farmer, the tiller, if you take that poem Solitary Reaper, we find that how he talks about a country lass who is happy amidst nature. However, she talks about the country lass, and here we can have a picture of this over an Grecian urn. And next thing we can see the Solitary Reaper. A Solitary Reaper. It is about a country lass who is just reaping and singing a song. So here we find that the ordinary common man's that is become the characters of the poetry. The situation is the harmony with nature. So whenever the man has disregard for nature, that is being pointed out. They give a warning about all these things in their poems. So we find that these are the beautiful things about the romantic poetry. So coming to the next age is the Victorian poetry, and there it is. The age, we can find the writers like Tennyson, Hardy, and Robert Browning. So all these writers, they are important writers, and they had, it was a lot of due to the science and technology and industrial revolution, people started losing faith in religion and things like that. Lots of questions regarding religious values, all this. These writers express their concern for this. For example, in the poem Dover Beach. So Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach is a classic example of this kind of a poetry. So here we find that here it is in the form of a dramatic monologue. Dramatic monologue is used, is a technique used, poetic technique used in order to bring the innermost thoughts and feelings of the poet. Here we find that Arnold is talking with this lover, but he does not expect an answer for his questions. So here he is saying, the sea of faith. Once upon a time, the people had a great faith in religion. So people had values in their life, people had turned to God, and they had a great faith in religion. So now everything is being shaken due to science and technology. Man has forgotten all these things, and that has led to lots of commotion in the society. Laws of faith has led to people have become alienated, and that has made him very sad. So this is the technique used here. This is a dramatic monologue, and here is a nature setting where we find the sea is roaring, and he's talking about the naked shingles which are found, the pebbles. He's commenting on the pebbles there. So all these pebbles and things like that, he talks about the values, religious values, and how it is being shaken now. So here the tone is the mood of the poem is very sad, and he is raising lots of questions in the form of dramatic monologue. Next, we find that in other moments, important moments which emerged during the American poetry also is next group of poets, where this American transcendentalists, they Emerson and all these people, Thoreau and all these people, we find that they believed in nature, turning to nature. They talked about the unity in nature, and how nature can, you have to experience nature, and in a very calm place. They went to Toro went to a warden pond, or like we find that they went to the hilly areas and they wanted a kind of experience, a kind of a spiritual experience through nature. These kind of poets, they advocated simple life and they wanted man to do connect themselves with the nature and enjoy a kind of a spiritual experience. So this is what is special about this American Transcendental poetry. And this group of poets were also a great lover of nature, and they wanted to experience the raw nature, and they advocated a very simple life. So another moment we find is the Beat generation. So Beat generation are the people who did not conform to any kind of traditional things like that. They raised their own voice and they wanted to attract attention. So among them, the very important writer is Ginsberg, and his work, How, is a masterpiece in this Beat generation. So another group of poets who emerged is the war poets. So the war poem are the poets of World War I. We find these are the important writers like Sassoon, Rupert Brooke, Wilfred Owen. All these are the important poets. The speciality about them is they were both soldiers as well as poets. They express the horrors of war and how horrible it is to be a soldier. So here in Wilfred Owen we find that he is a poet. He says that he is talking about the pity of war. So it is a tragedy, and they feared and they warned the world that they don't want any more war. They don't want a second world war, a third world war. So he expresses his concern for the people and how people are become insensitive to the other human beings. So the person, his poems are really is a kind of his poems are really filled with all kinds of this pain and horror of war. So here he says in this poem, Insensibility, Wilfred Owen talks about how insensitive they become. So the soldiers have become seen all things red. They see their friends being killed in the war and they're lying, and they just walk over them as though they walk over a cobblestone. So we find that how insensitive you become to the pain of other person. They are not given a proper funeral, and they become, they just wait for their death. Today they have got their alive. They do not know whether they will be alive the next day or next moment. And the previous day they would have been a friend. Now that they be an opponent in the enemy's team, and they be fighting with one another and killing one another. So he's saying that war is futile. There's no point in having all these things, and it is killing everything. It's taking away, separating human. It's parting people from their family. The family loses their husband, brother, sister. The relationships are cut. And they're just like they're used by the people in power like gaps to fill in. The front row soldiers, they were just sent like flowers or something like that, or lamb in a slaughterhouse where they are just killed. So this is the plight of these soldiers, and they warn the people not to have war anymore. Like another kind of poetry. So this is what is about war poems. Another kind of poets in the modern era are the poets like T.S. Eliot and W.B. Yeats are the important figures there. With them the modernist poetry began, and they used lots of free images in their poems, images and symbols in their poem. And here we find that it's a kind of the pain of war and how the man has lost his importance. That is what we see in his poems. He describes the whole thing as a whole world as a wasteland. That is a picture you get in his poem. So here in his poem we find that it's a poem about the love song of Alfred Prufrock. So here he is inviting this lady love to a cheap hotel where it is full of dust and dirt, and we find that this man is in the setting of it is a cheap hotel, and it is a dirty and a lousy place, and he is inviting his lady love to that cheap hotel. Let us go tonight. And the main idea, central idea is he wants to propose his love to his lady love. The proposing love is something a very romantic thing, but he chooses a setting or a location which is very dirty, very lousy. So that is the trend of, that is what is the reality. They wanted to bring in the realism and things like that. And here another thing is, youth and love will go hand in hand. But here we find this man is a middle-aged man. He's full of complexes. He's not very sure of himself. He's not very that sure whether this lady will accept his love. We find that this hero is full of inferior complex. He's full of complexes, and he's hesitant, and he sees that how these ladies talk about all this upper class ladies talk about the great intellectual things and their activities, and he even more feels very low in front of those ladies. So that is what we see in this kind of wasteland is being presented in the poems of these T.S. Eliot and W.E. Yeats's Byzantium, or Sailing to Byzantium. The plight of the modern man, the restlessness in the mind, the restlessness of the soul, how they are not settled in life, and all these things we see in these writers. Another thing we find that Ted Hughes is also another important poet of this period, and he also talks about war and other things, nature and things like that. All these men were once upon a time, the 6 young men were posing for a snap, and suddenly they are killed in war. So the place is there and the photograph is there, but these men are no more there. They are not there. You know, we find they are killed in war. That is the plight of these people. That is the tragedy of war. So the photograph was there alive, the picture is there, but these young men are killed in war. So next thing is, we find that another kind of poetry which was popular during this period is the imagist poetry, and we find that these people try to communicate through the kind of images. They wanted to create mental images. By using a lot of images, they wanted to communicate their ideas. The important people we find are Ezra Pound and D.H. Lawrence and James Joyce, and these are the writers who are well known in this thing, writing this kind of a poetry, images poetry. So we find that they didn't have any fixed form. Again, they used all the free verse, and they used a lot of images to communicate their ideas. So you find, take the poem, D.H. Lawrence's Snake. He uses a lots of images in order to bring in the those mental images makes us feel through our senses, like how he gives a very detailed description of the cool shade of the tree. But it is also through words he creates that how the summer, it's a summer season, it is warm and things like that. So he uses lots of color images throughout to bring in the contrast, and there we find the moral conflict of education versus humanness. That is the main central issue there. The thing is, the poet comes there to take water, and he finds a snake there drinking water, and he considers himself as the second comer, and he waits for the snake to finish his job. But what is happening? Internally, psychologically, there's a conflict within the writer. Religion has taught him snake is wicked, you have to kill it. So education has taught him that you have to kill the snake. It is poisonous, otherwise you will be hurt. Another thing is telling, society has taught him that you are a man, you ought to be brave and kill the snake. So these are the conflicts the poet undergoes. Ultimately, he takes a log and throws at the snake. The snake, which is so comfortable so long, considered him as a friend. Now he is so disturbed. So later we find that the poet regrets for his mistake. He says that a lord, he has become like a lord, and he has not treated him properly. That is a feeling he has, and he cannot it's a kind of a feeling which he cannot rectify the situation. The snake has already left the place. So that kind of with that kind of guilt feeling he ends the poem. So next, another kind of poetry emerged in this 20th century era in American poetry. We find that it is the confessional poetry. Actually, the confessional poetry, it uses a private, most shocking, innermost feelings are being displayed in the form of poetry. They are not, ashamed of expressing the innermost thoughts, feelings and emotions in this type of poetry. So here Lowell gives us a name of confessional poetry, and we find that Sylvia Plath and all these writers, they use this Anne Sexton, and these writers talk about their anger, frustration, even their suicidal tendency. Everything is reflected in this kind of a confessional poetry. They confess. It is a kind of the naked feelings are being displayed in these poems. And the sample poem is like here we find that it is a kind of a private, even shocking things are reflected in this poems. So we find that Sylvia Plath is both a feminist too. She is expressing her anger towards her dad. It is both a feminist poem as well as a confessional poem. We can give it as an example for both as a feminist as well as a confessional poem. She expresses her anger towards her father, daddy. She calls you are like suppressing me so long, and I've been like living inside your shoes. I want to kill you. That's what she's saying to her daddy. She's saying, I want to kill you, dad. So long you've been dominating all through my life. I just want to kill you and do away with you. So she's talking about the suppression she experienced as a child by my father. And the next level is her husband. Her husband is unfortunately Ted Hughes, who leaves her and goes with another woman. So that all these things together provokes her to write this poem about Daddy. This is a very private, autobiographical, confessional poem, and here we can find all the feminist views also find place in this poetry. So next kind of poetry is the post-colonial poetry. So we find that how these colonizers, due to colonization, they grabbed the lands of people, the natives. They took away the land. They become the owner. The Britishers became the imperialists, became the owners of the land, and made the owners of the land as slaves. So the pain of being treated as a slave is reflected in the colonial as well as the post-colonial poetry. This poetry has become very popular. Here we find the natives, how their culture is being destroyed. Their religious practices, their traditional sites were being demolished by the British people. So this pain and anger is reflected in the form of poetry. Here in this poem, Bolaring says, the song is gone, the dance is secret with the dancers, the ritual is useless. So here, it has become their own land itself has become alienated from them. So they are being separated from their own place. They are not the owners anymore. They have to be as slaves to the English masters. So with the culture, the destruction of the culture, the destruction of the religious practice are a very, very painful thing for these writers. And they express their pain in this form of poetry. So the Bora ring is a very, very important religious site, and it is a kind of an initiation ceremony takes place in this Bora ring, and how it is being destroyed. And this feeling is being registered or recorded by a famous writer, Australian poet called Judith Wright. So we find that both English as well as the natives write poems like this. So this kind of a poetry movement was very popular during this time. So another thing that I found is the feminist movement, and how I told you that feminist poetry talks about male domination. In every way, physically, emotionally, a woman is being suppressed. It can be, when it is a black woman, they undergo doubly, they are suppressed. If it is a white woman means, the suppression is lesser. Another thing is all over the world, the women underwent the same kind of a problem. So they didn't have enough freedom. They have to fight, they have to struggle to get the voting rights, they have to struggle to choose the right partner. They were considered as property. Law has suppressed them, religion has suppressed them. So in every way they experience suppress. So a group of women emerged in order to fight for their rights, and that kind of a people, among them we find that Adrienne Rich Maya Angelou, and these are the popular figures in this feminist writing. So we hear in Adrienne Rich, an American poet, she talks about the snapshot of a daughter-in-law, how a woman is expected to serve a man. Her main job is to beautify herself. A woman should look beautiful. That is the most important thing. She is not expected to do any kind of intellectual activity. Intellectual activity is not appreciated by the men as well as the women of their own group also. They try to suppress the women. Sometimes we find another woman becomes another in the form of a mother-in-law or an aunt, they become her own enemies when she tries to prove herself intellectually. That is the main theme of the poem, Snapshots of a Daughter-in-Law. So how they've been wasting their life just in getting involved in making their skin soft or beautifying themselves, dressing themselves in order to please the men community. They expected to do the household chore and they expected to produce children and take care of the home. These are the things expected of women. Whenever women cross these boundaries and they try to prove themselves, they were suppressed by all regimentings or they are attacked morally and things like that. These are things we find in this kind of a feminist poetry. Another important moment emerging in this period is 20th century is the ecological poetry, eco-critical poetries. The writers of experience that this world it is our duty to preserve this globe due to this global warming and things like that, ozone layer depletion and other things like that. Man has polluted his own home. The world is our home. So we do not have, we have exhausted all the resources, and how we are going to have a very dark future without nature. We cannot live. That is the most important lesson. So man tried to conquer nature in his ego. He thinks that everything was created for him and he tried to exploit nature, and now he's experiencing the consequences in the form of tsunami, earthquakes and things like that. Now they think that it is a duty of the writers as well as each one's individual to bring about some kind of an awareness among people in order to preserve Mother Nature. So here we find that another writer talks about how these mountains were eroded due to cutting down of the trees and things like that. She's comparing the hilly regions to that of a woman, how by removing the trees were like a dress. So by removing it, they made it naked, so exposed to sunlight. So here there are so many writers who all over the world, they express these concerns for nature, how to protect our globe. That's an important burning issue which is taking place. So we found that today's class we saw the definition of poetry, how to appreciate a poetry by looking at the theme and what is the theme, what is the style of the writer, and what are the images used and things like that. Then we saw the origin and development of British poetry. Later we saw the important trends both in American and English poetry in this present era. Thank you, students.